I'm Mark Golub, and as the primary season continues to steamroll on, here's the way things are shaping up as we head into Super Tuesday number 2. In the Democratic race, I'm sure you know that Bernie Sanders won a surprise victory last week in Michigan. The polls had him 17 points behind. He wound up winning 50-48, squeaking out that victory. Despite his victory in Michigan, however, Bernie still trails Hillary by a wide margin in the delegate count, 1,231 to 576. Now, tomorrow, there are 3 more important Democratic primaries, and the polls show that in all 3, Hillary once again has a significant lead. So it looks as if Hillary Clinton is on her way to becoming the Democratic nominee. On the Republican side, many people are now referring to the primaries as a circus. Here's where things stand in the race that clearly revolves around Donald Trump. In the delegate count, Donald Trump has 480 delegates, but leads Ted Cruz by only some 110. Rubio and Kasich are pretty far behind as we head into 2 primaries crucial to their political fortunes. 2 large winner-take-all states are in play tomorrow night, John Kasich's Ohio and Marco Rubio's Florida, and each need a win to stay in the race. Here's what the polls going into tomorrow's contest show. In Ohio, Governor Kasich leads Donald Trump 39% to 33%. Kasich had said he will leave the race if he does not win his home state. At the moment, this race is too close to call. While in Florida, Donald Trump seems to have an insurmountable lead, which could mean the end to Marco Rubio. There are, by the way, 3 other Republican primaries tomorrow, including Illinois, where Trump has a pretty good lead over Ted Cruz. What's most important, however, is what happens to Donald Trump's candidacy if he loses either Ohio or Florida. Most experts believe that if he does not win both of those states, he will not be able to win enough delegates to sew up the nomination before the Republican convention in Cleveland this July. And if there is an open convention, many people believe the party will choose someone other than Donald Trump, no matter how many delegates he may have at that time. It's also been a very controversial week for Donald Trump. At one rally, a Trump supporter sucker punched a protester in the face. In Chicago, Trump had to cancel a large rally because a contingent of protesters, said to be organized by MoveOn.org, threatened to seriously disrupt that rally, and there was a fear of violence. And at a third rally in Dayton, a man threw tomatoes at Donald Trump. So how should we see these primary races, Democrat and Republican, as Jews? And each of them have a drama of their own. For some insight, I'm so pleased to be joined now by one of America's leading columnists, the senior online editor of Commentary Magazine, Jonathan Tobin. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Jonathan, again, for our audience, we should first put you in perspective. How would you define your own political leanings?
Well, I'm a conservative. Commentary is a conservative, is the voice of the conservative movement within the, when I say politically rather than religiously, within the Jewish community. As we have our feet in both worlds, writing about both Jewish and secular political and foreign policy topics. But yeah, I'm on the right, so there's no doubt about that.
Okay. So let's talk about the issues that are now dominating the media, especially Donald Trump. Jonathan, have you met Jews who said they plan on voting for Donald Trump?
Oh, sure. We shouldn't exaggerate that. The overwhelming majority of American Jews are going to vote for the Democrat, whoever the Democrat nominee is this year, and that nominee will be Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders is making some noise. He's going to make her work all the way to the Democratic convention. But the books are cooked. The Democrats, with their superdelegate system, she starts out with an enormous advantage, as well as the overwhelming support of the African American community. So she cannot lose that nomination.
Mm-hmm.
And most Jews will vote for the Democrats. They're liberals. They're Democrats. That's not in doubt.
Exactly.
But the assumption that all Jews are not going to vote for Trump is simply wrong. I think he has an interesting and at times it seems almost irrational appeal to a lot of Americans who are very upset. They're angry. That's the cliche of 2016. They're angry about the way the country is going. They have good reason to be angry in many respects. They like his appeal to American greatness. They are angry about illegal immigration. Some are angry about trade, which is something that actually on which sort of mainstream conservatives and Republicans and mainstream Democrats tend to agree that they understand that trade is good for the economy. But a lot of people, whether it's just working class Democrats or Republicans or others, and Jews sometimes fall into that category as well, are attracted to this message. Mm-hmm. It's part of the appeal of Sanders, although he's a socialist, he's very left wing. Both of them are drafting off of this sort of working class resentment, mm-hmm. and that's shared by some Jews. There's no question about it, and some Jews also buy into his views about immigration. So it's not it's not a negligible phenomenon, but it's by no means anything close to a majority or a plurality.
Jonathan, are you angry at the establishment and some of the things that Trump tries to speak out against? Incidentally, it is remarkable how many things Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders say in common, even though they each have very different styles. But how angry are you?
How angry am I? Well, I'm a journalist. I have to keep an even keel to write about even those things that I care passionately about,
yes.
whether it's domestic policy or support for Israel. So I'm not angry for a living. But
okay, let me ask it a different way.
Certainly there are issues I'm concerned about, but let's understand this anger. The so-called establishment, it's kind of a mythical term, both within, certainly within the Republican Party. The real establishment died back in the 1960s. It's never really been replaced. And quite frankly, a lot of the things that Trump is sort of exploiting, this anger that things couldn't happen, that Republicans weren't able to stop Obama's liberal agenda, what they're really revolting against is not this mythical establishment, but the Constitution. We have divided government. That's why things are stuck in Washington. The founders of this republic set up a system which frustrates majorities. It's supposed to be hard to change things. It's supposed to, the branches of government are supposed to sort of cancel each other out if there isn't consensus, and we don't have consensus in this country.
Mm-hmm.
One of the interesting phenomena is that a lot of what seems to be, a lot of Trump's positions are not just close to Bernie Sanders, they're close to what Hillary Clinton believes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even on foreign policy, even on, to take the example of Israel, when he speaks of being even-handed, this is straight out of the Obama playbook.
Absolutely.
There's something kind of, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance going on about those who are supposedly so angry about things. What it seems to be driving it is not really sort of frustration, how do we change Washington, but a belief in a sort of strongman, the authoritarian impulse, the idea that we need, what in an earlier era of American politics we would have called a man on horseback. But I would argue that this is not unique to Republicans or even new, because we got a lot of that 8 years ago when Barack Obama rode to the White House on a cloud of hope and change, which was a lot of the same sort of hubris, the idea that we could elect someone who could turn back the oceans and change foreign policy, but with the magic of his personality. Substitute Trump's braggadocio and chest thumping and chauvinism for Obama's apologies or his environmentalism, and you kind of get the same thing. It's the same sort of belief that one person can transform American politics, and it's bound to fail. It would
Mm-hmm.
fail. It hasn't really worked with Obama. It's not going to work with Trump, but it's being fed by the same impulses. So I think a lot of our talk about anger is, I think, a little misleading, because he's sort of feeding off of something slightly different. It's not just that people want to change the country; it's that they're attracted to a celebrity.
You said that you hear from Jews who tell you they're going to vote for Trump or they support Trump. Are these nice, good, thoughtful Jews? Because at the moment there's a suggestion that the only kind of people who could be for Trump are undereducated and in some way racially motivated, and that Trump has appeared to their fear factor. On this program, my interest is speaking to somebody who can talk about the Jewish dimensions that are present in this election. So I'm asking you, the extent to which you have any feel for it, who are the Jews? What are they like? And how would you describe them, those who have said to you Trump appeals to them?
Well, I think they come in different. Come in different shades. Some are even Democrats who
Absolutely.
who don't like the way the system works, who believe that Obama failed. They don't like the Republicans, and they see him as something new, something different. They like the fact that he's politically incorrect and is willing to flout conventions. It's a stereotype, and it's simplistic to say that they're all haters. Now, of course, I can tell you that there are a lot of haters that like Donald Trump. Every time I write something critical about him, they fill up my Twitter feed and email inbox, and often with some very nasty anti-Semitic comments. The dog whistles that Trump has played with his dancing back and forth, whether to condemn or disavow David Duke and the KKK. I mean, this was a very cynical attempt to exploit that sort of thing, just as his encouragement of violence at his rallies. He likes to have it both ways. But it would be a mistake to just put it down as a revolt of the lumpen proletariat against the political establishment. Mm-hmm. A lot of his supporters are sort of decent, upstanding American citizens, including some Jews, who just don't like the way things are working, mm-hmm. and believe that somehow he can change it all. Mm-hmm. I think they're wrong, and I think his positions are so self-contradictory. He has no solutions. And as I said, certainly from a Republican point of view, he often sounds much more like a Democrat. He gives people a lot of attitude, very little policy. Mm-hmm. But it would be foolish to say that this doesn't appeal to a lot of ordinary Americans who are our neighbors, our friends, and even our relatives.
Absolutely.
So don't make that mistake.
Yes.
It's that simple of nice people versus bad people.
Yes.
It's not.
I have to say, I speak with, by the way, I haven't spoken to anyone, Jonathan, since this past week, and I was very upset that Donald Trump would say, even if it was just for one day on ABC, that he didn't know who David Duke was, which was a lie, and that he couldn't immediately repudiate David Duke and the KKK. And I haven't spoken to people since the kind of eruption of near violence. There hasn't been real violence, but near violence associated with Donald Trump's rallies. But prior to this week, I've spoken to many thoughtful, committed, educated, intelligent, lovely Jews who say many of the things that you say about why they're attracted to Donald Trump. And I am dismayed, Jonathan, with the way in which, again, mainstream media in general and even mainstream Jewish media has sort of dismissed Donald Trump out of hand while not understanding the power of his message and the reason he seems so attractive. So I appreciate your analysis. Anything you want to add in that regard?
Well, I think the one thing to understand here is that every time he does something crazy or or outrageous. Whether
Yes.
started with the comments about Mexicans being racist, and then John McCain, not being a hero, and then it went on, and then it was David Duke, and now it's the violence. We need to learn our lesson already. None of these things, these latest things, won't impact his support. They're not going to convince his followers to abandon him.
Why is that, Jonathan?
Because his outrageousness is what they like. They like the fact that he is revolting against convention,
yes,
that he upsets the apple cart, that he won't act like a responsible politician, that he won't act presidential. We keep waiting for him to behave like a president, but that's not what a lot of his followers, including nice people, want from him. They want something really different. They want somebody who will kind of burn it all down, or at least pretend to. And so that's the core of it. It's not racism. It's a revolt. And part of it, let's also understand, we look at what he says, and we think it's a phenomenon in of itself. Donald Trump's the attraction to Trump and Donald Trump's behavior is the symptom of what's wrong with our society, not the disease itself. He is the eruption of anger against a culture that has become so politically correct, where people can't say anything, where everything requires a trigger warning. The kind of nonsense that goes on campuses. People are angry about it. They don't like what they see in popular culture. And thus, they are willing to accept even a very unacceptable, really, in many ways disgraceful public figure who a generation ago wouldn't be treated seriously. He's somebody who sort of belongs on the Howard Stern show, not in presidential debates. But he's getting support because people are fed up, not so much with, necessarily what Obama has done, what the Republican establishment has done. They don't like the way the culture is going, and he is the counter-revolution to the culture.
Yes. But I did hear Brian Lear on NPR give a fascinating analysis where he said one of the reasons why there are so many people who support Trump whom you would think would not is that there is we don't normally talk about the American public at large with the word sophistication. But he was suggesting that there is a subtle sophistication that the media does not attribute to the voting public. And the sophistication he was talking about was that people understand Donald Trump speaks in hyperbole, and that people really don't believe he is as off the wall as he says he is. They don't believe he will do things to the extent that he says them. And that the one minor difference I have with you here is, I think that the people who support him do expect at some point Donald Trump to pull back and sort of be presidential. And when they imagine him, if he were to win the White House, and they imagine him in the White House, they imagine him at a press conference, they imagine him standing next to the Prime Minister or President of France, they don't see a caricature. They see Donald Trump playing it straight. And when Donald Trump says, I can be presidential, people believe him. And there is something, as you say, so refreshing. There are things that are very upsetting, outrageous, to use your word. But there's something also very refreshingly honest about Donald Trump. And when he says, I know the system, I've played the system, but I'm self-funding, and I'm going to be able to work outside the system, it's very attractive, Jonathan, to people who just have lost all faith in politicians and in the mainstream media.
Well, I think there's some truth to that. The only thing I would say in response, sort of in slight disagreement, is saying that people expecting Donald Trump to be anything other than Donald Trump are probably mistaken. And people who think that what he, there's sort of, there's cognitive dissonance here. They see him as a refreshing, sort of answer to a truthful that he tells it like it is, but then they also expect something different. You can't have both. It's these things are contradictory, and I would say he's fundamentally dishonest. He's a very deceptive kind of person. He's a marketer. He is in a sense a con man, and expecting him to be different the truth is, if he were in the White House, and I don't think he will actually win a general election, I might be proved wrong. We don't really have any idea what he will do because he may not have any idea what he will do. He doesn't even have a foreign policy team. We really don't know what he will be. But the idea that he's going to somehow transform himself into something a little more normal, dream on.
Okay.
He's always going to be Donald Trump.
Okay. By the way, what's fascinating to me is, while I understand what you're saying, I hear people who know him talking about a very different human being, including Hillary Clinton, when she talks about the Donald Trump she knows at his wedding. I'm told he is a gracious and very generous person, that he's lovely to be around, and that on a personal level, he's been a fabulous father with fabulous children. So that I think he is a showman, that's to be sure. I don't know that he is a malevolent person or one who couldn't, if he were put in the position. Parenthetically, I do not believe he's going to be president of the United States. I agree with you there 100%. But I find, again, some of the criticism of him to be over the top and not based in who this man can be or seeing him for as complex a figure as he actually is.
Okay, let me respond, but let's talk to one Jewish issue. You're right, some of the criticism is over the top, and I've written about that. He is not a Nazi. The whole idea that pictures of people raising their hands in Nazi salute, that was overblown. They were not giving Nazi salutes. There was something deeply troubling about a presidential candidate asking people to pledge allegiance to him, kind of the way Barack Obama
They did not. That's not fair. He never said pledge allegiance to me. He said what every single candidate says. You've got to vote for me.
No,
he just does it. He does it in
Raise
his
your
own
right hand and promise no matter what you'll vote for me. Again.
And by the way, then he said in that, I'm only kidding. Of course, you can vote for anybody you want, but I think you should vote for me. It's no different than Ted Cruz. It's no different than Hillary Clinton. They all want their people to ultimately promise to vote for them.
Of course they do, but there's a difference. What we see around Trump is kind of a cult of personality.
Yes.
They're all egomaniacs, but Trump
they're all egomaniacs.
But Trump takes it to a very different level. So
I don't think so.
A lot of the criticism is over the blown. He's not a Nazi, but if we're going to talk about Jewish values and how we judge people by their deeds, not what their friends and what their children or what their pets think about them. So I'm not persuaded by this. He's a nice father. He's a good person. You can say that about anybody. We're all nice guys. To our friends. That's not an argument to vote for anybody or to not vote for anybody. So I'm not convinced by that.
Fair enough. By the way, as somebody who is on the conservative side of the spectrum, is Donald Trump a legitimate conservative?
Not at all.
Is he a legitimate Republican?
No, not at all. I mean,
Okay, hold on. Is he a racist?
I don't know if he's personally a racist. I know that the things that he's been dog whistling is that he's been encouraging it. And quite frankly, if it's purely cynical, that doesn't make it any more attractive to me. He's engaged in some very nasty, some very irresponsible kind of statements about various groups, and again, it's just frankly, it ought to be not acceptable.
Okay, in the little time we have remaining, give me your sense of how the candidates within the Republican Party, if Trump is obviously not someone you believe should be president, is there a candidate in the Republican Party you believe has the stature to be a serious and wonderful president? And again, I believe it'll be Hillary Clinton. But if there were a Republican that could make a decent challenge to her run, whom would it be from your perspective?
Well, I should state first of all, I'm not here in print as well commentary. We don't endorse candidates.
Correct.
I'm not here to tell people who to vote for. I'm here to talk about ideas and to analyze what's going on. I would say this: if any of the other Republicans got to a general election in a 1-to-1 matchup against Hillary Clinton, assuming that all of the Trump supporters didn't walk out and become, a third party. And it may be the other way around. In fact, maybe the conservatives will be trying a third party option later this year. I think Hillary Clinton is eminently beatable. She's a terrible candidate. She's wounded by all sorts of problems, especially her lack of credibility and her honesty issues. So I think certainly there were a lot of would-be Republicans who could have beaten her in the general election. I don't think Trump can. I mean, again, I could be proved wrong, but there are credible alternatives, and there are still credible alternatives to Trump. He hasn't won the nomination yet. He may. We're speaking the day before Florida and Ohio vote. If he lost both of those, which I don't think is going to happen, he'd be hard pressed to get a majority at the convention. But they have to beat him. So we'll see about that. But certainly there were other Republicans that presented a much better case for conservative
Okay.
defense.
Does Donald Trump frighten you as a candidate?
Does he frighten me? I don't frighten easily, but I certainly think he represents a complete departure. He represents the transformation of American politics in a terrible direction.
Okay.
And more or less the destruction of the Republican Party as we have known it.
And what would you say, without telling me, obviously I'm not asking you to endorse anybody, but what would you say about Ted Cruz? Does he pose a threat to the Republican Party and the sense of overall unity?
I guess Ted Cruz is, is clearly a conservative. He's clearly a Republican. He's not some Johnny-come-lately. So in a sense, he would represent, sort of the values of the party and the mainstream of the party. The problem is that Ted Cruz in his 3+ years in Washington has basically been at war with the leadership of the party. There's a temperamental issue that some see with Cruz. He's actually sounded much more responsible on the campaign trail than he did when he was trying to shut down the government. So, yes, there are people in the U.S. Senate that would rather see just about anybody president than Ted Cruz because they don't like him and they don't like his tactics. But, with him, it's a tactical issue. It's not an ideological issue. It's not a question of beliefs. And with Trump's positions on trade, on entitlements, on foreign policy really are a digression. I mean, they're a clear difference from what Republicans have stood for in the last couple of generations since Ronald Reagan. So he really would transform the party. And I think there's also a question of his behavior and the kind of things that he says and he stands for that, a lot of Republicans with good reason consider to be a disgrace.
Okay.
Cruz is someone that a lot of them don't like. He's right wing. But there's a difference between sort of not being comfortable and with seeing someone who's just completely out of the mainstream.
Okay. I want you to know I hear many people tell me that Ted Cruz to them, and again, this is my reporting, is more frightening to them than Donald Trump. And that I find this to be a most fascinating political season, something I have never seen, and I've watched every single one of them with intensity. There's nothing been like this. Look, Jonathan, you and I know each other for a long time. I have the utmost regard for what you do, for your opinion, for the work you do now with commentary, the work you've done before that. And I consider you to be one of the real articulate voices on the American Jewish scene. So I hope you'll let me follow up with a subsequent call after we see what happens on Super Tuesday 2. There are so many issues we didn't get to. I hope we can continue the conversation. In the meantime, I wish you all the best.
Thanks very much. I'll look forward to it.
Thank you. The thoughts of Jonathan Tobin, senior online editor of Commentary Magazine, as always, raising very important issues for all of us to think about. And again, I just hope it gives you some food for thought. My thanks, as always, to our director, Sloan Copeland, production coordinator, Serge Goldberg, the associate director of JBS, Dara Golub, and the producer of Election 2016, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.